Hi, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for that wonderful, inspiring talk, Mark. What I thought of when you were mentioning leadership is movement building. And I went to a session, I just want to comment on this quickly, from the AIA, the Design Health Leadership Group, held a session and it was talking about design and health, as we tend to do in this group. And we brought in someone who leads branding efforts at George Mason. And they talked to us about, okay, yeah, you have the science, and you're trying to convince people, but where's the movement? Where do you go to trust someone to say, yes, let's make the change? And I'll never forget it because he actually cited the environmental movement and how people don't trust scientists very much when it comes to that, to be brief. And so we really had to look at who does the public trust to make the difference. And they actually ended up turning to the weatherman and weatherwoman as the trusted advisor. So if the weatherman or woman tells you that there's an issue with climate change, there's an alert today, or PPMs are high, you need to stay inside, people trusted that and thought, wow, there might be something going on. So when they talked about climate change and the connection to high particulate matter and ozone, people thought, oh, I trust this person. And I've never, I've never forgotten that, because in this room today, we've spoken a lot about the science. But we're trying to move it to the translation of how do we get it out into the world? When is the day in which people say, I demand to live in a healthy space? Why am I not in this space? I loved the concept that Lauren shared that what would happen if my building could expand my lifespan by 30 years? I've heard that for everything from, let's see, eating broccoli to, an aspirin a day, but I haven't heard about the building, and I've long thought, where is place as a prescription for health? Where is your building as an asset for health? Why do we not think of place like that? And so I do think that we're at a really exciting movement stage. The reason I work for the WELL Building Standard is to be part of a movement that 10 years ago I feel like I was trying to convince people or trying to argue for it, and now I find myself more in the position of saying, how do you do it? So before it was why, and now it's how. And how do I convince an owner? How do I carry this design strategy out? How do I demonstrate that there was a difference that was made? And that's a huge shift. And we're not all there, but it is an honor and pleasure that we get to go all over the world. We're in 15 countries now. So I've been giving presentations. We're in China, we're in Qatar, we're in London, we're in Canada. And people are getting this. And they're really getting it and like, how do I do it? How do I do it? And that's really important that we have a benchmark. That was so critical to me because at the same time people were saying, how do I do it? They were also saying, well, I already have a healthy building. Isn't that count as a healthy building? And I'd say, well, okay, you did it. What does a healthy building mean to you? And they would say, well, it's LEED, or there's good air quality, or there's this, or there's that. And it's not to say that that's right or wrong. It's just that we've gone past air quality alone. We understand that our health is not just what we breathe, it's what we eat, it's what we do, it's our stress. If I told you your entire health depended on what you're breathing in right now, you'd say, no, I think my health's a little bit more complex than just the air quality in this space. So there's all these definitions out there of what people said as a healthy building. And in fact, this year I had the honor of reviewing several Greenbuild submissions because WELL curated an entire education track at Greenbuild. And needless to say, there were several sessions that submitted that said, we designed the healthiest home. We designed the healthiest building. And when you looked into the abstract, you found there was little ability to actually say, how exactly did you determine that? And was it beyond, I'm sorry, but carbon dioxide alone, right? It's a huge element, but there's a lot more to health. And buildings can go a lot further than air quality. And we bring our partners at the NIH into this conversation, the world of the health industry, the multi-trillion-dollar world of the health industry, into the multi-trillion-dollar world of real estate. You have some huge potential, but these people, when they come together, as we've found, need a benchmark, need to know where to start, and we need to understand that health is complex, and we need lots of partners out there to really understand how do we design, how do we build, and how do we actually operate and sustain health? Because if I'm going to sit there and say that your building is an asset for health, it's not enough if day one it worked. It has to work on day 60, it has to work on day 1,000. And that's another challenge, right? And so you know that, so now you guys have all the science in the world, you've applied it, and day one the building opens, and people come in, and I call them messy variables because they come in with true stories, formaldehyde-laden artwork, and they come in with literally school teachers with aerosols, and Before you know it, oh, fried chicken. Fried chicken, my lead platinum hospitals, all over the place, right? And I get it, cardiologists, right, always have a job. But the reality is you design this really healthy building, and it's not operating day in, day out to be a healthy place. So it's not really an asset for your health. The design was. So how do you design, how do you operate, how do you maintain health? And health is also personal. Health is really personal. It's personal when I'm in Qatar. I don't speak about health as being an individual issue. In the US, it's kind of get up and get moving and get healthy and eat healthy. I come from the field of population health and public health, so I've always been looking at the group dynamic behind it. And in countries that look more at social health, it's not what can I do, but it's how do I help my friend? How do I help my coworker? How do we think about health together? How do we break together? How do we eat together? It's a different context for understanding health. And every place in the world that I think it's fair to say right now that's incorporated well has made it their own. Because health does not stop at the building either, right? Health is a day in, day out, beyond what we're doing here today. And I keep saying this, and gosh, I really hope it changes super soon. Is anyone in here a human resource expert? So we have still largely not been able to draw that crowd into this conversation. I'm extremely excited that Well has several people right now that I got off the phone with HR they're requesting it. They're the ones that are coming forward and saying, we want to go for Well, because a lot of our standard looks at protocol changes. So it's everything from FMLA to social equity issues. We look at travel policy. We're really progressing into okay, once the building is designed and operating, what's happening day in, day out? How do we bring in the HR professional into the conversation around creating a healthy place really soon in the process? Most HR professionals I do speak to say, this is super interesting. I know nothing about this. I was brought in the last meeting and I was given the design. And we need them to be at the very beginning of the design process. Literally, because of the fee on lots of design projects, that's just not been possible. You don't bring them in. They're not incorporated. We have some leaders in the room today that are doing that and are pushing the envelope. And I really hope that next year we get maybe some HR folks to come and really speak about how do they look at this from the other angle of saying, now you designed it, how do I operate and sustain the change day in, day out with my employees? How do I make health personal for my employees in this building and truly look at the whole project and building as an asset for health? So I think we're at an unbelievably exciting time. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to learn a little bit about Well. So I speak about this quite a bit to a couple different audiences. And so I thought I'd dig a little bit deeper today into a couple of actual features so you guys had a taste of how we take the data and science and actually translate it into some of the features. So let me just start with a little bit of the background. Is everyone here familiar with the Well Building Standard? Is anyone not familiar with it? Or is it the first time? Okay. I always have like half hands when that happens. But a couple folks, that's great. So thanks for coming and learning about this. So the Well Building Standard was essentially launched in 2014 October, and it was in development since 2007. Since then, we have 17 million square feet that are registered or certified in our pipeline. We have 6 certified projects. It takes a while for them to get through. About 50% of those projects are in rehabbed, renovated spaces. And as I mentioned, we're in about 17 countries to date. So that's in 1 year. So this is basically our 1-year anniversary since we launched. And we've moved from corporate commercial into residential, multifamily residential. We're in schools, we're in restaurants, and we're expanding. And something that's really critical about our expansion is partnership and transparency and a continued evolution. And as we know, the science will continue to evolve in this. And so it's really critical that I ask everyone today, and many of you already have, you're our clients, you're our partners, you're our experts, to be involved in the process that we have to continue to expand this. In October 2015, we announced as part of Delos that we will be part of the first well-certified city district in the world, which is Tampa, Florida. And people know Tampa has they're like number 30 on the walk score out of 30 that was ranked in the country. So I think that there's a great Cinderella story, but it's also a fantastic opportunity of saying we have a mayor, we had the developer, right? And we have the right people at the table. And Clinton Global Initiative, that's how they work. Let's get a partnership together and create a healthy place. So it's been a really exciting time for that as we expand into neighborhoods and communities, and of course, healthcare is right behind that. So we work very closely with our partners at the U.S. Green Building Council. So green is about sustainability, and WELL is about the people. And so that is why we're married together. If you go for LEED, there's about a 25% overlap if you go for platinum with WELL. We're not trying to recreate the wheel on sustainability. At the same time, I've always argued that sustainability is health. So they're very synergistic in that way. For Living Futures, for folks that go for Living Building Challenge, there's about a 15% overlap with the highest levels. And so we want you to do what you do best in the sustainability programs and marry that with a program that looks at the complexity of health. And they're meant to operate together, and they're much easier, right? Because things like air quality, we want to make sure that you have an energy efficient system, but don't cut those CFMs down to 12 because that's what makes a building more energy efficient. We need there to be a higher airflow quality for our occupants. And I've long fought that battle of just because it's easier to measure energy doesn't mean that that is not as just as important to measure health, even though it's harder. Everyone's fought that one, but that's why we work on the standard to complement each other. And there are a couple of those points within WELL and LEAD in which you'll see us pushing a little bit against each other to say, how do you balance between sustainability and health? So what's critical is that we look at, we give you a pathway, right? We have 102 features that you need to meet, but we do focus on the operations of the building, and we also look at the behavior of occupants in the building as well. So what we're trying to support is some of these behavior changes as well. The development of the standard was, since 2007, I think it's really important for this group in particular. It was an organic process. It was initially developed by Delos, and as intellectual property became bigger and bigger and bigger, it was really clear that that needed to go beyond one condominium in New York, and it needed to instead become a public document that anyone can download. And that was the effort behind essentially starting the International Well Building Institute. It is a subsidiary of Delos, and it is partnered with the U.S. Green Building Council and GBCI to operate and maintain that standard, because operating and maintaining standards is a really difficult thing to do. It's ongoing. You've got a lot of people that try to cheat their way out of the system, unfortunately. I hate to say it, but it's true. And so when you say that this is a standard, how do you meet that, continue to meet it, and how do you have experts that are part of that continued evolution of meeting that standard so that people know if the hallmark is that you've gone for green or the hallmark is that you've gone for well, that they know what's behind that. And so we partnered with them to launch that standard development as part of the International Well Building Institute. We will have a very public and transparent governance process as we continue to evolve new standards as part of WELL. The initial process was happened in-house, where we brought in scientific reviewers. We then brought in practitioners and medical. So this gives you a sense of some of the scientific review experts that we brought in. I know several folks in this room are also part of that. We then brought in practitioners. So, this is the bridge, right? So you know the science. I know I'm supposed to work out 30 minutes 3 times a week. What does that mean for a designer? What does that mean? I've literally heard presentations by people that said, yes, this is the best science out there, but does that mean I need to sit? Does that mean I need to stand? Does that mean an open collaborative staircase? Do I need to sit, stand, desk? Do I need to go outside? How often do I need to work out? Where's my heart rate? There is a complexity, and so the designers are sitting there going, okay, what does that mean when you translate it? What is the actual strategy? And translation has always been very near and dear to my heart of, we got the science, but now what do we do with it? How do we apply it? What do we do? So these are some of the practitioners that came on board to say, here are some strategies to really translate that science into practice. And we know that there are proximal and distal outcomes when we start looking at environmental stressors. When I'm exposed to formaldehyde and I have a direct, immediate proximal impact from that, and I have a headache, that's very different than I look at a garden that is incorporating biophilia, and then as a result of that, that supports a more calm environment, as Esther spoke about, and in doing so, that maybe helps the stress response and supports my immune system, and then I have a distal response of not dealing with chronic acute stress as much. So that's a little more difficult than these proximal impacts we look at with air quality. So we have, and it spans it, right? And that's a really important part of it, because that offers a complexity of the standard, how we look at both proximal and distal impacts around environmental stressors and design changes. Finally, we had a medical review, so we had an opportunity to work with the Cleveland Clinic, and we continue to work with Mayo today. We have launched the Living Laboratory at Mayo, the first of its kind to test and validate and understand more of the research to help inform future editions of the standard, and just furthermore, how to understand how these products that are coming to market, these new detectors, do they work, and how do they work? And it's really difficult to measure this when they're in natural environments. There's lots of complexity to that. So we're looking both in a laboratory setting and in naturalized settings to try to understand what are the impacts of some of these built environment interventions on human health and well-being. So there are 7 concepts that we focus on: air, water, nourishment, light, fitness, comfort, and mind. And for those of you that focus a lot on materials, that lives in the air category predominantly. There's about 29 features in that. So let me see here. For time's sake, I'm going to dive into a couple of these very specifically. I also teach an 8-hour workshop. And so I think a couple folks have come to this in the room. And so they've had like a deep dive of understanding every single feature and why we did that and where it comes from and what's the science and how to apply it. It's a lot of science, but it's also, I think, really valuable for practitioners because eventually they have to sell it. And it's very different to sell, let's see, what could they be selling? An active, open, collaborative staircase and say it's the right thing to do. It's very different than knowing the science behind what happens when you're not standing, what happens to metabolic rate and insulin, what happens to your ability to really just even musculoskeletally, right? What happens when you're moving around, and trying to understand how is the body supposed to work. And when they come equipped with more science, it makes the conversation, I think, easier with the client than saying, here's a list of what to do for health. It's, here's what we understand, and here's how we want to apply it, but there's a science behind that. And the standard is set up so that each feature has an intent. If you come to us and say you got a different way of meeting that intent, we'd love to hear it. In fact, we will honor that. We'll work with you to validate that as an alternative attempt, which is in a lot of different countries, there's lots of different ways to meet an intent. So it's important you know the science and the intent behind it because we do see that it'll evolve. People will have different strategies to meet those intents. So critical to the WELL certification process is that you submit documents for review, but you also have a performance verification. And that means that we send an accredited WELL assessor on site about a month after your building opens is the first opportunity you'll have to do that. And they will be doing a series of tests on site. And I think here's my slide. So we look at air quality, water quality, light, thermal considerations, acoustic elements, and we also do a series of spot checks. Mold is a spot check. Sit-stand desk is a spot check. So we're on site validating it. And this is really not easy for a lot of clients because you can say you did all the design strategies. You can check the box, yep, we have that protocol. But it's not always easy to implement. And after you do implement it, like I said, we have had the clients that bring in their donor-sponsored formaldehyde-laden artwork, and all of a sudden you're not meeting those air quality tests. And those can vary, right? And so even if this happens after the project's opened, what happens 3 years from now? What happens when you've said, this is an asset for health, we've invested in health, but 3 years from now there's no way to monitor it. No one's actually been given the job to monitor, change air filters or water filters. And as a result of it, it just sort of goes down and down. And a big part of the conversation today is not new construction, it's those renovated buildings. And how do you maintain and sustain health in those environments? So another very important part of the standard is that after you go through performance verification and become certified round 1, is that we are asking that you continue to be recertified at a minimum of every 3 years. So I'm going to dig into a couple of the actual categories and features. So the big thing with water that we're interested in is, and we don't talk a lot about water in this group actually, but really critical in knowing that you get enough water and clean, safe, drinkable water. So before you reach for your bottled water right now, you might ask yourself 20 years ago, did you even have bottled water? And what did you do? What did you do before you had that clean tasting water? So bottled water is really good at sitting on the shelf and is often heavily chlorinated. And as a result of that, you also might think that it tastes cleaner and better, although you really need a lot of the nutrients that come from groundwater supply. And so the trick is, how do you get it from the source treatment plant into your faucet and actually have that drinkable water? Because what happens is it goes through all these pipes. In fact, if you laid the piping of the US side by side, it would actually circle the world 40 times over. That's how much water infrastructure we have currently in the US. And we are ranked at a D+ on our water infrastructure. And that is how much it leaks. These are the problems that we have. I went through a workshop and someone was like, oh, it used to be a D-. We're definitely up this year. And I was like, thank God. So the real trick with the standard is making sure that it gets into the faucet and that you have that clean, drinkable water. We've had some clients report, I think this is really interesting, is that they're so used to having the water cooler on site, this huge water cooler, and people don't drink from the faucet. No one drinks from the faucet anymore. They've actually had to retrain people through signage to say the faucet has clean, drinkable water.
Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time.
You'd think we'd have more by now.
If you would like to continue, press star 1 now.
So this is just an example of how we took an understanding of what's happening with the water supply, water infrastructure, and how does it actually get to your tap. And finally, how do we come in and test for that? My understanding is it's actually one of the more expensive tests in the well certification process. You have a lump sum, but because not a lot of people are asking for these tests, and so we have to send away for that. We are hoping that within a matter of time, those costs will go down when we actually understand what's in the drinking water. I'm not going to go into exactly the types of things we're finding in the drinking water today and some of the challenges with that, but suffice to say, understanding what some of the safe levels are here is really critical, and also particularly when we think of developmental health and children. So we spoke a lot about light today. I think for time's sake, I'm going to kind of push through this. I will focus on saying that the way we took the data and translated it into a feature for the standard, what's critical to understand is that you can have the biggest, brightest, most amazing LEED platinum building, and it has the best intents in the world, an amazing curtain wall, and amazing views, and the architect comes and takes pictures of this amazing building, and a month later you come back, the shades are drawn, and people have not actually gotten the view, or they've not actually had access to light in their eye, right? They're now turned away from it.
I'm sorry,
they had glare.
We did not get your name. After the tone, please state your...
Oh my God. Solar heat gain. So significant problems, and that's not to say the LEED system is not exceptional. It's to say we had the science, and now the science is evolving. How do we partner that with saying getting an efficient building that also can support human health? So we need to make sure that when light comes into space, it's reflected into the eye. We look at a lot of those vertical surfaces. Light's got to get into the eye, and we have different ways of measuring that. Not all light is good light, as we've learned today, and I don't think I need to go into any more detail about just how much we're learning about light, biological darkness, that if you choose to be in an environment with poor lighting, that has detrimental and potential long-term implications for your health. And for many people, they have no idea what good light is versus very good light. They only know when it's very poor, and even then it's challenging. So ask yourself, do you know what good light is? So let me just finish with talking about fitness. So I gave you a little bit of the example of, okay, I know I need to get moving, and it doesn't just count to go to the gym in the morning. I learned how to evolve over the last, couple thousand years to be moving throughout the day. Right? So it's all about intervals, up and down, up and down, up and down. I'm not supposed to run for 30 minutes and then sit stagnant the entire day. We get that. You need to have an excuse to get moving. The number one protective factor for obesity is active commuting. It means you have to move to get to where you need to go, because no matter what, you're going to do it. Everything else is just option time, right? I'd love to do that. It'd be great to go to the gym. Definitely, yeah, someday. But that doesn't actually translate to people moving. And we are so good at removing all physical activity from our lives. In fact, we've even figured out how to shop online. And for a person who likes to shop, it's unbelievable how we've taken out even the ability to walk from the parking lot into the store. We've removed that. That used to be some of our physical activity, right? That's gone now too. So we're experts at this, and we need to also think about how our environments can help to repair that and support physical activity throughout the day. And we have to create curiosity and play and engage people. So how many the fire staircase in buildings where, oh my gosh, sorry guys, USGBC, AIA, across the board. I've tried to use staircases. I've gotten locked in them. They are concrete. They are scary. They're the beginning of a horror movie. I'm sorry. I'll call myself out on it too. And, even in the well building offices in New York, like we try to open up the staircase and we try to get people moving in and out, and there's like there's one window, and we're shifting into a new environment. And one of the things we're really asking for is that we need those staircases, because you can work with these fire staircases, but it's challenging, and they're not easy places to use, and they're not always enticing. Everyone knows it. We want the standard for you to actually demonstrate that you entice people to use the staircase. You get people moving, you get them curious, you get them active throughout the day. Okay, so I think I've covered this in saying that we've really grown the last year, and that we are very open to partnerships and learning how best we can grow in different regions of the world, in different sectors, and how we can make well adapt, and how do you personalize it for your own office, for your own company, because health is very personal. We were lucky that our first client was CBRE, and so what they've done to really reconceptualize office spaces in the US and around the world in implementing well as part of their building practices. We just announced Lendlease will be a new major partner of ours, internationally speaking. I think several people in the room know James. He presented years ago, one of the most extraordinary workplace health promotion programs at Lendlease. And so excited to work with them both personally, as a company, and as an organization that will actually build and design healthy places. Macquarie, so Judy, I've been using this example, I probably got it from you, like 10 years now, I don't know, but Macquarie was one of the first to use activity-based work environments. Does anyone remember that? That means get moving, go to where you need to go. You don't have to sit in one spot. They've been doing this for so long, and so we're really lucky that they're one of our partners for the Well Building Standard. They even created a music room. God, they're so cool. They've got a beehive. They told us it was actually harder to get the permits for bees than it was to get the Well Building Standard. And so I think I'll end it with that, guys, and I'm happy to take questions for the panel. And I think I just want to end on a note that personally the reason that I work for Well is because I do think that it's a critical part of the movement. And as I've emphasized multiple times, we cannot do it in isolation. It's a tool that's out there, but partnerships are so critical to us across the board. I'll recognize our work with AIA, with ASID that's in the room, also our work with World Green Building Council, Health Product Declaration, Cradle to Cradle. Like, we're out there, we want to support partnerships across the board. So we welcome you to be part of this movement with us as well. So, thank you.